Hey everybody. Hi Cassie, how are you? Thanks for joining us. Sorry, getting a bit of a start here. All right. So, for everybody watching today, we're continuing on our FPS design talk. We are in week 6. So if you have not seen the previous 5 weeks of this particular topic, I talk about kind of game design theory and level design, or game design theory and first-person shooters. And then last week I started talking about level design. And last week I rambled a bit too much and talked a lot about theory of level design and kind of concepts in level design and stuff like that. So today we're going to try to jump in a little bit quicker. We are going to start off today with talking about how to look at holistically your whole game and how to break down in theory, like where all of your games go, where all of your levels go, and then kind of, because a big part of designing a level is to know where it belongs in the grand scheme of things, right? Is it the first level in the game? Is it the last level of the game? Is it midway in the game? And all those things are really, really, really important to know, because you got to know like what gameplay mechanics are going to be available to me, at that point in the game. What is the storyline, and what are the key events, and what are the weapons I have available, and all these things are all stuff that you need to know before you get started in designing your level. And so if yourself or whoever's in charge of the levels has not done an overall arc of your entire levels, you don't need to know like super detail about those, but you do need to have some understanding about what are all the levels and how they all fit together, right? And then when you understand how they all fit together, hey Big Lob, welcome back. So if you understand where all of your levels kind of fit together, then you have a starting point. And part of what I'm trying to reinforce with this is that you don't have to start from like complete scratch. You kind of know that that your level has to fit in somewhere into the grand arc of your game. And these same principles, again, will apply into open world or other kinds of things. For today's exercise, we are going to consider that we are building a more traditional, probably 25 level game. That's a 25-hour game, with each level being 1 hour. But that's something else that's important, right? Is your level 10 minutes long on average? Is your level an hour long? Like, that's scope and scale and a bunch of these questions that you need to understand from the start, right? Like, what am I building? Where does it go? And then as you start to understand where it fits in the storylines and all these other things, a lot of stuff start to kind of make sense, where you're like, oh, okay, I know this. I need to have this, and this here. I need to have this here. I need to have that there, right? I have these things available to me. I need to teach these new things. And when you understand all that, it can make the design of each individual level slightly easier, because, again, you're not necessarily just having to like completely start from scratch and be like, what do I need to have here, right? You'll kind of know through some of that logic. So first of all, I am going to paste this link in here into the chat channel. Hopefully you guys can access this. This was a article, if you have not seen it, that I wrote a long time ago. Gosh, 22 years ago. I can't have been designing games for that long. Sheesh, now I'm really feeling old. So the just double checking here, and all right, so hopefully that came through for you okay. One second. Computer is doing weird things. All right. So this article came about because I was trying to explain the same concept when I worked at Microsoft to my designers all the time, and I just got tired of like re-explaining the same thing over and over. And so I finally was like, look guys, let me break this down for you. And so this problem in my mind is really easy, but in most even professional game designers, this is something that while it makes logical sense, it isn't necessarily easy. So we're going to spend a little bit of time today. Like, we could easily spend a class or a course on this particular topic, But please, go read the article, go into detail. I'm going to kind of skim it conceptually today just so we understand that the first step is understanding where your level fits in the game, right? And then through that, what does your level need, and starting to build a sense for what are the things in your level that you need to have in it. So I'm going to use kind of 3 core concepts in this process to help you guys kind of understand how do I lay things out, right? And so the easiest thing to first start with is actually, let me do a new drawing here. So let's see here. So we can do this as kind of a bit of a flow chart here, but we could literally say like, let me just put a little bit of fill color in here. All right. So what I'm literally doing here is kind of starting to define, and I'll actually usually start realistically in a flow chart here, but just to kind of see you understand how this is sort of how these levels are flowing together. Now, in some cases we might actually have something where this could be a branching path. So this could be something that's coming here, and it could be something that's, oops. I always hate it when you're trying to draw multiple lines at the same time. There. So in other words, this kind of structure could be linear, branching, nonlinear, other kinds of things. And so you can kind of decide how you want these things to be, right? But just using this as kind of a rough example here. So, the first concept is that you need to have a bunch of levels in a game, right? You have to have all these things that are going to fit together. And then the second concept is the most simple. They could be a story, which a game and most games, and again, this concept of what I'm talking about today is good for, we'll call more traditional story-based games, right? These are games that are following a story, have a storyline, have a story structure, all that kind of stuff, right? And so I recognize there's puzzle games or whatever that may not follow this. So again, this is not 100% applicable to every genre and every kind of game. Now, traditionally in school, or if you've taken any writing classes, they have and they break down stories into what they call a 3-act story. Now, the 3-act story is basically beginning, middle, and end, right? And so, if you don't know, much about it, I mean, this is just show you a quick. So, a quick picture here from Google. But again, a traditional story, whether that story is 1 hour long or whether that story is 100 hours long, most story arcs traditionally have some sort of a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And the pacing and the storylines are not consistent. The pacings and stuff should be kind of going up and down, going from more intense to less intense, and varying, in that way, right? And so that's something that's pretty common and something that's fairly industry standard. So I'm not going to dive into 3-act story structures, right? But the setup, the confrontation, the resolution, is a very traditional structure. Now, oops. I want to introduce you guys really quick. David Siegel, I believe, was the one who created the 9-act story structure. And it's a very, very similar thing to a 3-act story structure. Let me see if I can find it. Sorry, I should have had this prepared. And Let's see here. Sorry about this. That's still a more traditional 9-act structure. Well, let me show this one. Leave me alone. Okay. All right. So, sorry, it's a little hard to read there when it went full screen. But again, Google 9-act story structure. I think it's David Siegel, Sigel, and he's kind of the one that kind of has pushed this and stuff. So it's very similar in concept to a 3-act story structure, but it's a little bit deeper and it has a lot more stuff to it. So I prefer to use a 9-act structure versus a 3. And when I have 25 levels, this tends to work a little bit better for me. And so again, this is the way the story and the levels are structured, like what flows into what, right? Like what does the player doing? And so for example, in the opening, now each one of these acts does not need to be a level, but it's a start to kind of say like, well, is this just the opening cutscene? So like the opening here, that could just be a cutscene you've got in your game that establishes where you are, what you're doing, who the bad guy is, or any of that kind of stuff. And that could be purely something that's there, in that way. It also could be, as you get into Act 2, conflict, that could be the very first battle. And, the aliens maybe invade your planet, and now you've got to fight them. And, and something bad happens, and so you're going to, deal with that. And, and these things progress, right, as the game progresses. So that's the second thing, so the, what is the structure of the story, structure of the things. And the third one is by Joseph Campbell, and it's called The Hero's Journey. Let's see if I can find a good... Well, leave this here. There is a million references for the hero's journey, and my article breaks these down, as well. And you'll see that it starts with, this call to adventure, this refusal of the call, and all of these things happen until you basically win the battle and, come back and, and kind of win. And so if you look at movies like Star Wars and things like that, they follow this exactly. And probably 95% of all movies follow the hero's journey from Joseph Campbell very closely. So The Hero with 1,000 Faces and some other books have covered this. If you're unfamiliar with Joseph Campbell, I highly, highly recommend Google him, find out about him, read his books. And even if you go on YouTube now, they have all of his... He did a bunch of documentary. He's passed away some number of years ago. 10 plus years ago now, I believe. And but they had interviews with him, and the stuff's phenomenal. And so where's all this going? Like, how does this, sort of like fit together? And so again, if you go to like my article, I talk about again the 9-act story structures. I talk about conflict and pacing, and kind of I'm building towards what all these things are now, and so again, you'll see that, not Siegler, Vogler was the 9-act structure. So you can see here, kind of side by side, there is these kind of, the Vogler's outlines and the Campbell's outlines. Again, these are progressions that stories traditionally would go through. And to be clear here, the way I think about this is that the game itself generally needs a story arc, right? There's a arc that's following each game, and there could be sequels planned, there could be expansion packs and DLCs and other things that you're also accounting for. So it doesn't necessarily mean that arc is fully complete, but again, you need to make sure that bad things can always happen, right? And if you want to have sequels and stuff, you got to prep for that too, which is another layer of complication we're not going to get into today, but keep in mind again that when you get into like, how do I wrap up my stories, how do I finalize these things and stuff, that gets exponentially more complicated if you need to also account for like a sequel or another game, or when you're building an IP, a brand, or a universe. That's much harder than building a product, right? And so this is not necessarily accounting for that, as well. So if you think about these are methodologies for the game, but they're often also quite often methodologies for a level, right? So now I would say that the Campbell stuff is really for the game, but a 9-act story structure, or more like a 3-act story structure, even within a 1-hour story. Think about like a TV episode. So think about games really in their structure is more like TV episodes often than a movie, right? So you think about like a season of a more traditional TV show. Now these days in Netflix, they've gone to these 10 episode seasons, which I hate. I like the more traditional 22 episodes of a traditional TV series, right? But in that, you've got 22, roughly 1 hour, 45 minute, chunks, right? And in some TV shows, they're completely disconnected. They might be the same characters and whatever, but it's kind of like each one's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? Each one comes to some resolution. And then eventually, sometimes in some shows, you might have for a season or part of a season or some number of episodes, you might have like one bad guy that's going to be like the main villain for a while, right? The Walking Dead, you got Negan that comes in for like a season or two, and then, and now he's like one of their friends, and he, sorry, spoiler alert, and, things like that. So you can have bad guys come and go, you can have other people come and go, things like that. So these arcs can also be applied within a level itself, as well as the entirety of the game, if that makes sense. And so each level or each episode, right, is really its own mini arcs with its own mini things, that's tied into a much bigger, overwhelming arc. And so if you think about that, that's kind of what we're structuring here. Now, I believe, unfortunately, I noticed in the GammaSutra article when I was just looking at it here, that I believe they cut off the last section of my article. Just double checking. Yes, so they did. And I did, and just, there's a bunch of links and references at the end of my article as well. And so, that's definitely go check those out, and check those out as an extra research. But let me talk about this really quick, and then I'll jump into another article. Let me just see actually if I can share it with you guys. All right, so hopefully this link works. Let me know if this link doesn't work and you guys are interested in reading this. So this is the same article that's on GammaSutra, except for you'll notice that in the GammaSutra article, it ends here on page 5. And for some reason on GammaSutra, they cut out the second part of it, which is the breakdown. And so this particular article that I just shared with you has the level breakdown there. So we'll get to that just here in a minute. But let me I'll just use my article here for those of you that want to see it. So the first breakdown you want to really do in this is you want to understand all these different factors in your level, right? And in your game. So, like, what's your total gameplay time? So we talked about, here, 25 levels and 25 hours. So that means that, each level is, roughly an hour long. And then the next thing to understand in your, or at least at some point for your game or a level, now, these numbers could change per level. So you might get into this for the whole game on average and first do a total game time. Or you could do it, later. But basically, what are you doing in the game, right? Like, are you fighting, exploring, problem solving, i.e. puzzles, traveling, traversing things, and just traveling, doing other stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then also how many characters, secondary characters, enemies, those kinds of things. And so by breaking down a level and understanding kind of what is the first step to also kind of understanding, how complicated it is. If your main character answer is 1, then you got to make sure that your game level, or if your number of, enemies is 3 or whatever, right? Then don't go design a level that's got 50 enemies in it. So it helps you kind of ballpark the scope, the scale, the gameplay, what's in it, those things. And so that's one of the first things that I tried to understand for the entirety of the game, right? Now, again, I'm skipping through this because you guys can come read this article. And I want to get on to like designing the level. So I apologize if this is moving a little fast. Please, again, everybody, thank you for joining me today. Welcome, anybody that's new. And if you got questions, don't be afraid to interrupt. Don't be afraid to ask questions, right? So I'm here to try to make sure you're getting this. And I understand that this is a little bit challenging for me to break down in 30-ish minutes, and stuff. So it is moving a little bit quickly. All right. So what I wanted to just kind of jump to really quick is for you to understand like how I combined all this together, because this was the disconnect. It's really easy to talk about a 3 or 9-act story structure. It's really easy to say I got 25 levels. It's really easy to say I'm using, the theories from Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, right? But like, how does that all come together, and how does that help me as a game designer, right? And how does that help me figure out what is in my level, right? So let me just show you an example of what I did, right? So you can see that these areas here, with the little diamond next to them, are the 9 acts here, right? So there's acts 1 through, here's act 5, all the way through, the very end. Here's 7. I'm not sure why, where 8 and 9 are. Anyways, but you get the point. So those are the Vogler 9 acts, right? And that's how those are. So those are setting the high level structure there. And then I have CS in here for cutscene. So I'm showing that this whole first part, meaning the backstory, is just being done through a cutscene, right? And then I'm getting into the Act 1 introduction, and I put in some red text. The red text is just there to, again, these are all there for you as the students to learn from, to help explain a little bit of like what's going on in each one. So then you get into the blue text here, and these are the Joseph Campbell thing. So you can see that the ordinary world is here, right? And you can see all the way down to there's 12 different stages, 12 different steps to the Joseph Campbell story, right? Meaning returning to the end. And so I've summarized in the red text here, what each one of these steps roughly is, what needs to happen here, right? And so this tells you a lot, right? Like right here, and again, this is ideas and suggestions for how to follow Joseph Campbell. And please keep in mind, this does not have to be followed literally. When you study his work and you understand his work, like there's a lot of ways to interpret this. There's a lot of ways that you don't have to necessarily use this as literally as Star Wars did or other movies. But again, when you really study it and you'll see things about it, you'll see that that this is used in literally tens of thousands of movies. This is, and there's absolutely nothing wrong, in my opinion, with using these formulas to help you understand how to design your levels better, right? And so you can see that each one of these, like the player must get home. Okay, the player must make it back, with the item to save the world. They often call it the Elixir. What is that thing? In the case of Luke Skywalker, the Elixir for him was the plans for the Death Star. So when he was able to get back to the Rebel Alliance with the R2-D2 plans, that's what the whole started off this whole movie was. R2-D2 had the plans for the Death Star. He had the schematics, he had the floor plans, and he knew where the weak point was that was going to allow them to attack this seemingly impenetrable, big creature thing, and be able to destroy it, right? And without that plan, without knowing where that weak spot was, they were never going to succeed. And this thing the Death Star had already destroyed entire planets, right? This thing was extremely powerful. So he was able to share that with, the Rebel Alliance, and their final level or levels or whatever you want to call it was them going in and going down the trench of the Death Star and blowing it up, right? And that was their finale. But that came after Luke, brought that elixir back and therefore, triggered that final level, that final sequence that allowed them to save themselves and to win, right? And then you could say that level 25, in their particular case, even though it didn't have action, although it could have been a final cutscene or resolution, was them getting their medals and being awarded and, that kind of thing. So however you break that down, but I'm just trying to give you a sense for when you start to see these things come together, it starts to make a lot of sense. So how do my levels fit into that, right? So first of all, I start with locations. So I also try to figure out, well, how many locations are in my game? And by locations, what I'm usually doing is define these by art sets, because that's really where most of the work generally is for a lot of games. I mean, yes, some games are handcrafted and every location or whatever is different, but if it's an open world, then the locations might be, the desert over here. It doesn't have to be a different city, a different planet, a different whatever. It could just be, a valley over here and a valley over here or this over there, right? So the locations could be within one map. But even, a game like GTA or something like that, right? They're going to have different districts and, here's where, maybe the drug dealer and criminals live, and here's where the rich people live, and here's where, the industrial area, and stuff like that, right? So even within a single city, you can have areas, right? And that's what these locations, can be. And so I'm also trying to, through this process, minimize the amount of art that's needed in order to approach like new new levels. So I'm not saying I don't want to have in my case in most of my games, I don't want to have the entire game take place in one area. Now you could, I mean, that could be the kind of game you're trying to build, but just be careful about understanding how much art and content and how many areas are going into your level. All right. So now you'll see that, I have a bunch of these levels here. So levels 1, 2, 3, all the way down to 25, right? So there's my 25 levels. So you can see in this quick concept for you guys that, I was able to break down all 25 levels. I understand very roughly, what's happening in that sequence of levels. Is it, what's happening, what's going to happen in those levels. Is it battles? Is it fights? Is it, where is it sort of happening, right? And then, and how is that fitting into my 9-act story structure? How is that fitting into my hero's journey? And so through this, I start to sort of know, like, okay, I've got level 4. Level 4 is the wise old man, right? And, and in this particular case, like in Star Wars, this is when Luke Skywalker meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi is the wise old man. Things like the reluctant hero. When Luke is first given the call to adventure, as they call it, which is the second step, that call to adventure is R2-D2 plays the message for Luke, and Luke's like, nah, I'm not feeling it. Like, I'm not going, the family blocks him, all these kind of things. And that's called the call to adventure. So he got kind of that message and he didn't take it. Right. And so now he's the reluctant hero. And so that's kind of what's going on, what's going on there. And then the wise old man, happens. And then generally there's something bad happens. And that's when Luke's family, his aunt and uncle get killed. and that propels him basically into the adventure where he's the reluctant hero, but now he wants to go, into this hero, right? And then, then there's other things where, he goes in and, they have to, find an ally, and that becomes Han Solo, and things. And so this here, even the Joseph Campbell stuff, literally the hero often goes to a bar for more info and help. That didn't come from me. That's straight from Joseph Campbell, which was literally taken exactly by George Lucas. And literally, like, Luke Skywalker goes to the Cantina bar on Tatooine. Han Solo was in there. And so, that's how that whole thing came about. But, that's the you can see how, like, Star Wars is using this, right? And stuff. And so now, I've got a few levels in here. Now, something else to note that's also important to me is that I've never worked on a project where all of my levels are ever finished. So if I start off building a game with 25 levels, inevitably I probably will ship a game with 15 to 20 at most. And I know from experience that bad things happen, production problems happen, and things, in the production side, for this will inevitably happen in my levels. And so one of the things that I like to have, so you have, optional 1 up here, optional 2 there. You'll see that in a 25 level game, I will mark at least 5 levels, basically as optional. So what does that mean? So optional levels to me are levels that I, 1, designed last, 2, I designed their storylines in such a way that if I cut that level tomorrow, nobody cares. Nobody will know any difference. So I create what I call a subplot, right? Or what everybody calls a subplot, and these can be spin-offs and one-offs and stuff. And so in this case, like, let's say that, Luke and Han were flying from, Luke wanted to go to Alderaan, right? And so Han Solo picks him up in the Millennium Falcon, and they fly straight there. And along that journey, Obi-Wan teaches Luke how to use his lightsaber and, and some stuff like that, right? And they eventually come out, and Alderaan is destroyed by the Death Star before they get there. And that is just one sequence. So imagine in this kind of call to adventure, this is, where he meets Han Solo, and this could be the where he was supposed to get to Alderaan, here, and maybe there's some stuff along the way. So one of the things that you could do is like, okay, well, maybe we get attacked by or a bunch of rebels or a bunch of TIE fighters or whatever. They show up and they chase us off to some other planet. We crash on that planet, and now we've got to do some little mini mission. If you guys have watched the new Mandalorian series, which is amazing, it's played out just like the storylines and the story structures in that are very much just like a video game. And they do a lot of that kind of stuff where it's like, I'm heading over here, but something bad happens midway. I stop, I crash, I do that, I do that little side quest, and then I continue along my way, and I eventually get to my final journey. And but if I just got to my final journey and I happen to skip that episode, I'll be like, I didn't miss anything, right? Like, generally, I didn't get any new gear, no stories progressed. It's just something that kind of lengthens the overall experience and maybe doesn't add to it. But if it gets cut, I don't have to redo cutscenes. I don't have to redo my story. I don't have to redo other levels. I don't have to so in a optional level, there's no new story that would be relevant to the main story arc. There's no new, we don't introduce any new gear or equipment, skills, abilities, anything that needs a tutorial or anything that would need to be kind of introduced and stuff in some way, shape, or form. New characters, any of that stuff is not done in these levels. So these levels should always use. There shouldn't be any new art usually. So they should be really easy to implement and conceptually just stuff that just kind of gives you more to play with, right? And it takes you into maybe a new area temporarily and lets you do something. But they're not, they're designed to not, to be easily cuttable, right? And hopefully you understand the logic behind what I'm doing there. But again, you know, you don't want to build those levels first, and you don't want to, you know, you just want to be really careful with some of those. And then in all honesty, if I'm building a 25 level game, I will probably design another 5 levels to be easily cuttable. Now, not necessarily instantly cuttable with no ramifications. But I do find that it's important to have, you know, again, some fat, some buffer, and something there that I can, you know, and then when I start to design my levels and start building my levels, I save those for last, because then I know, like, if I run out of time, at least I can cut those easily, right? So hopefully this is making sense for everybody. Hopefully you're all still awake out there. And I think that's it for here. As far as trying to understand the you know, the full story structure. Oh, one last thing when it comes just to a little bit of a relatable side advice on this. In production, when you're building your levels, usually this is one of the rubs, right? When you're new to a game, most games, you know, assuming it's not a sequel or if it's just a standard FPS or something, then maybe you'll know kind of how to play, right? But one of the problems we have in game design is that the beginning of our games are often very boring. The beginning of our games is like supposed to be like, well, this guy is, you know, like Luke Skywalker in the beginning, right? If you think about Luke Skywalker on Tatooine, you know, he had decent skills with a blaster and he was an okay pilot. He had never flown a fighter jet. He had never been a Jedi Knight. He didn't know how to use a lightsaber, all these kinds of things, right? So to try to make a level interesting, like in the very beginning, can be really, really hard. But in the same hand, if I start and say the first level that I build for a prototype that I want the executives to play or something like that is level 10 of the game, then that level 1 is really hard, and 2, it, you know, has a lot of extra skills and abilities and other things. And so one of the challenges is that first level you build, you know, needs to be generally your prototype, you know, and that thing that's going to prove out, you know, why your game is fun. But in the same hand, you know, it's a challenge to make that really, really fun when, you know, you've got a butter knife and you're fighting rats, right? And stuff. And so, but if I throw in the big dragon and give you all the magic spells and all that kind of stuff from the beginning of the game, one, you don't know how to use them, and so you're probably going to have trouble, you know, with the battle. You know, second, how do you scale up from that? So a few games have done this by trying to allow you to, you know, when you get like to that first little bit of the game, maybe the first 30 minutes or something like that, something bad might happen. You get knocked unconscious, you know, whatever. They steal all your gear, you know, and you basically get reset at the beginning again, and then you start over. But you get this like first 30 minutes that's just amazing, and you got all these powerful weapons, and you're seeing all these cool special effects, and you're really excited. And then like, oh, okay, now you're back to the normal game, and you start over again, things like that. So this is an age-old problem. And from a production standpoint, you'll also find that the first level you build, I don't care how long you've been building levels, the first level you build in any new game is never your best. Like, you don't know the tools that well. Like, even if you're using Unreal or Unity or whatever, like, each game has its own nuances, right? Each game has a different way of functioning. And so the danger is that if you build level 1 first, 1, it may not be as fun like I was just talking about, but 2, it's really not going to be your best level. And so something else, just as one last bit of advice, is that, you know, if I have like let's say 5 level, you know, a 25 level game, and I have 5 levels, then, you know, as in production side, I might have, let's just call it 5 game designers, right? And each designer is going to build 5 levels over the course of the game. So let's say we have enough time for that. So I will have them start working on levels like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, you know, first. So I get kind of that second part of the game, and I make those. So designer 1 does level 6, designer 2 does level 7, and so on, right? And then once they've done one level and they've kind of figured out the tools and the processes and everything else, Then I have them go back and do levels 1 through 5 and spend a little bit of extra time on those to get those like perfect and stuff. And so in some companies like EA will spend a tremendous amount of time on level 1, like sometimes way, way, way too much. And that's why you'll see in some cases, some companies, their games start off really strong and then they degrade over time because, or the experience is subpar over time because the game starts to wane as the designers have put so much effort into the first level that they might spend, I don't know, whatever it is, 1,000 hours on level 1, and then by level 2 they spend 500 hours, and level 3 they spend 200 hours, and level 4, and so on. It just gets less and less and less, and therefore the quality of the game, the quality of the levels degrades, and that's what's happening there. Is that they're trying to hook you so much to have that one amazing experience, and then as you continue, the farther you get into the game, the quality, whether that's in bugs or just in general level design and thoughtfulness and everything else, can kind of degrade. And so that's why that's happening. But again, my personal experience is that, again, most designers will not build that first level to be the best it is, or they're going to build it once, throw it out, start over. And so you have to be kind of cognizant of that. So, sir. All right, so we are now going to switch over to the level design. So if anybody has any questions about any of this, please speak up. But hopefully this was somewhat interesting about how to build the arc for all of your levels and how to try to, again, kind of figure out what goes into your levels, right? And hopefully this kind of gives you some sense that you don't have to necessarily just randomize and randomly figure out what all 25 levels are doing, but there is a logic and there is a process to figuring out the arc for all of your levels and what's going to go in them and stuff like that. And so again, you've got to figure out what these things are and understanding, if you understand this, again, process, right? That's how you can build better games. And again, don't try to be smart about this. Don't try to feel like, hey, I'm a game designer, I can do whatever I want to do. That's not the way to go. Like, utilize conventions, utilize processes, utilize things like the hero's journey, 9-act story structures, things like that. Because remember that people are familiar with those things, and so those things are okay to use, right? And games are really, really hard. But again, we often try to apply movie writing techniques into this, when really like a TV show is probably a better example, again, of how we think about a season. So think about one game as really being like a TV show season, right? And each level as being an episode. And think about how that structures. Think about how that works. Think about how those things go. And do I spend more time, a lot of time in one place? One last analogy would be like Star Trek, right? Like Star Trek, not all of the episodes, but quite a few, not all the, all the series is, because Star Trek is pretty big. But, a lot of those were like, I'm on the Star Trek Enterprise, and I'm going from, location to location to location to location, and every week is a whole different location, right? And then there was some spin-offs like Deep Space Nine, which was a rip-off of the show Babylon 5 with J. Michael Straczynski creating that. And that all took place pretty much on one spaceship, space station, and had people coming to it. But again, going every week to a new location gets really costly in production. And so then some shows tried to start doing multiple episodes on one planet, one location, so they could have and reuse the same sets, the same, costumes, things like that. And in fact, I created we were creating a spiritual successor to Babylon 5, if you guys know Babylon 5, with J. Michael Straczynski. And Joe, who's a friend of mine, we were co-developing this together when I worked at Microsoft. And we wrote a 21-episode TV series, and and again, part of the B5 was definitely ahead of its time, and I wish we'd be able to get the rights. We tried to get the rights to it, and we couldn't. The people who owned the rights were stupid and didn't want to give us the game rights, and the IP died, and it's like kind of sad because I thought it was a pretty amazing franchise. Anyways, Joe and I, wrote a 21 episode TV series. We sold it to Sci-Fi Channel, or they optioned it. And, and we had every 3 episodes. So we would spend 3 episodes in one location, then 3 in the next, 3 or 4, and then moving on. And we did that to save money and save production time, so we could just build one set and, and reuse it for 3 weeks instead of trying to build a new set every single week. And that was a way to save time, save money, save, all sorts of production related stuff. So again, there's solutions out there sometimes that you need to be aware of, and in that same vein, right, you got to understand, like, what's the cost, on these level designs, right? Because again, the production side and the cost, and when I say cost, that's the artist time especially is probably one of the biggest costs, in your design time, and maybe an entire design team, and engineering, and who knows what goes into building one single level, right? And the more of a one-off that is, the more expensive it's going to be, and therefore you have a higher chance of failure. All right. So changing gears really quick. So again, in the first 4 weeks, we went through this document here. Let me share this out one more time. So for those of you that are new or just watching or whatever, I will share out this document again as well. Again, this is I hope, good reference for if you're building any game or you're building any shooter or whatever, that this document, even though, this is something I spent, let's say 8 hours on, right? We spent 6 to 8 hours there writing this document. Now this is, even though this took us, a full month to go through at 2 hours a week, remember that this is like what you could do in a day, really like literally an 8 hour day if you're a good game designer, right? And this is, 33 pages, right, of brainstorming and ideas, and none of this has been locked down into stone, but it just shows you that it's a good reference to say, like, okay, if I'm doing a first-person shooter, like, what are all the features going to be, right? And part of the point of what I'm trying to show today is, even though I don't know and I have not necessarily defined the IP yet, and we have not gotten into the story, so there's a lot of things. I'm hyper accelerating this process purposely right now, and I'm not going to get back into why I did all this. Please, if you're new, go watch the first 4 episodes, on kind of how I wrote all this, because I wrote all this in real time. But you'll see that it has all the core mechanics from movement to combat, and there's, weapons and, all sorts of stuff that just goes on and on and on and on, and I spent like one whole day just on weapons and one whole day just on like the health system alone, and things like that. But this is, a running, so for every game I build, I create kind of a brainstorming document that I like to remember every single idea that I have, good or bad, and I will flag certain things. You'll see, throughout this document that there is, let's see if I can find it here. Well, let's just say, vehicle armor, right? If I decide I didn't want to do if I decide here that I didn't want to do vehicles, I don't delete this in my brainstorming document. What I'll do is come in and turn the text red, and therefore red tells me, like, that's cut. Let's just say we don't want to have shield, or say we're not sure about shields, and this is, something that I am unsure about, then I'll often change it orange, right? So orange is on its way to red, but it hasn't been cut yet, right? Now, the reason I do that again, and I talk about this more in depth in previous episodes, is that, again, I can come back here now and be like, well, crap, we need to have vehicles in here, so let's go ahead and add vehicles back in, right? And so it gives me that quick ability, and I didn't just delete off like an entire set of features or delete out things there. So the process for how we do the systemic design is really important in general. All right, so right now we are going to start a kind of a new idea for levels. And I'm completely like just kind of winging it here, guys. So I'll try to explain the method to my madness. But right now I'm going to just call this level 4, right? So meaning this is not the first level in the game. And I'm arbitrarily choosing this based on I don't want to design level 1. And I don't want to design, you know, something too late in the game. This is supposed to be representative of the game enough that if somebody saw it and played it, they'd be like, ooh, okay, I get most of it, right? I get all the core stuff, and, you know, and so, you know, it's kind of like what's kind of there, right? And again, I'm completely randomly making this up right now, so don't, you know, I'm not necessarily applying great design logic, because this would be something that I could, you know, in a production environment, this is something I could spend weeks on, you know, or whatever, you know, at least days on. So, you know, not minutes on, right? So we're kind of just showing you how this process would work. But again, I'm moving very quickly here. So level 4, so what I want to do is, you know, key features, and the reason, really quick, why new features are really important for me to understand early on the best we can is that, you know, depending on the feature, quite often, you know, psychology and memory tells us that we want to have at least, you know, 3 iterations on anything in order to really truly understand it. So if we teach something just once, there's a really high chance that the person's not going to get it, right? So if we're teaching, you know, how to jump, right? If we just say, okay, run, jump, press A, bye, and then we don't ever like tell you how to jump again or whatever, people, it doesn't get set into their memory. This is a psychological thing. And I don't care whether you're learning a foreign language or whatever, right? You need to drill and practice and do things a few times, you know, 3 to 5 times really to get it sunk into you, and stuff. Now, not every tutorial has to be really heavy-handed. And, you know, I don't, again, I've mentioned this before, I don't like having very dedicated tutorials, but I want to know what new stuff is there, because I also think that or quite often know that will affect my level design. And so I need to be thinking about, like, where is that thing, like jumping, going to take place? And then do I have 3 to 5 places for me to teach the player kind of in a bit of a row or close to each other in their proximity, so the player is kind of forced to do it a few times, and then maybe it's some level of combinatorial, you know, stuff too. So maybe it's like first is jump, and then it's running jump, and then it's a long jump, you know, and then there's a double jump, you know, and then there's, you know, the jump to an attack, and then there's the jump to you know, a wall run or whatever those things are, right? And so you can have other combinations of things as well there, but the design of the level, the layout of the level will quite often dictate that. Now, if it's just combat and you're like, hey, you know, kill these 3 guys or whatever, generally, yeah, you could spawn, you know, have your little training area, and then spawn 3 to 5 guys in it. And that's kind of that same thing. Like, I got to use my sword, you know, and I got to kill these 3 to 5 guys. And if I do that, then there's a pretty good chance that player is now going to know, you know, how to do at least that basic attack. So you might start with a light attack and then get into a heavy attack and then do a combination, you know, whatever that requires you to do the light and then heavy attack, you know, buttons and whatever. And so building on each other, you know, is really important, right? I'm using Star Wars right now just to give you guys again, since we've been doing that as like a point of reference, right? You know, the you know, so anyways, you know, you get the point. I'm not trying to detail this all out here, but the you know, the idea is that you're breaking down what is in a level, right? What are all these things that are there? Actually, sorry. So, you know, let's say we're going to have the, you know, an exterior landing pad or something, right? So, you know, and maybe we have so again, you know, this is all up to you to kind of just pencil in, right? And then, you know, again, you might want to do this across like this level at all 25 levels, you know, before you come back and detail in a particular level, right? So, and again, I'm just brainstorming here and trying to use a point of reference of, you know, Star Wars and Hoth, and, you know, for those of you that have seen Empire Strikes Back and all that. So, you know, what are my new features? Okay. So that's where, you know, big and nasty. Probe droids, let's see. Why I just totally drew a blank on their the snow speeder, I think they're called. Flying vehicles. You know, Arctic survival, staying warm. I don't know. I mean, I'm just, again, I'm brainstorming here of like, what are these new features that, you know, we've got, you know, let's see. So, anyways, maybe that's all there is, you know, here. I mean, you know, it could have one new feature, it could have none. It could have a few. This being level 4, it's probably got a few new features. You know, we'll add one more. You know, like sniper rifle, right? So you can see that. This was, you know, where Luke shoots the grappling hook and then it goes up top, you know, that kind of thing. So I don't know, you know, again, just I'm trying to show you how when I start a level design, I start in words, right? I try to understand kind of like what's going on there. All right, so really quick, plot overview. What's the overall plot? So this is the overall plot for the level, right? And so this is pretty minor. I mean, you might write a page here. You might write, whatever is needed to really, get across the idea of what, the overall plot is, right? And then you might have like, actually, what I want to do here is, and again, just kind of making all this up. Don't judge me if these are horrible ideas here, but fortify the base. So here we're basically saying so So again, you can kind of see how we're starting to outline what a level is, in words, right? There's a lot of things here that we're putting together, and so destroying the probe droid, escaping Hoth, but here would be like, oops. So, so you can also put in some stuff like these key features. Maybe these destroyed. And again, it's all up to you to figure out kind of what these things would be. So like key features here. You might even have several things like use a sniper rifle. Right, so again, I'm kind of showing through each one of these little sections of the level, like what I'm doing here, right? This is so you can kind of just again get a sense for how I am, let's see here. Let's see, the key features, so this would be, the player can man like some big fixed guns and he's just, banging away. Like that could be like their key feature. It doesn't mean that there isn't others like, blah. Right, so you can kind of see how this can kind of break down. So these are all, sections of a level, right? So you could even kind of say like, or part or whatever. Let's see. Do you want to call it section or part? I don't know. We'll call this part. Anybody have any questions? Thanks, Big Lob. Glad you're still awake, enjoying this. So, again, fairly straightforward, right? You're trying to break down the intensity. You're trying to vary it up. You're gonna have, like here you got some kind of boring fetch quests and stuff, right? It's a little tedious, but you're setting up and you're establishing what's going on. You're doing some things, maybe repair some stuff. So this can be, a little bit more tedious, right? Not everything in your game necessarily has to be fighting and action and those kind of things, right? That kind of thing, right? So, again, you have like some basic mechanics, and whether this is 5 minutes or 25 minutes, right? Just, I'm trying to show how you're breaking up the action, right? It's not all just one big chase or one big fight. Right, and some can be a mix of it, and then these destroy the probes, just like if you remember in the movie, they go outside. And again, I'm not trying to follow the movie exactly. I'm just trying to use this as a, as a general reference. And then maybe I got to go out and look for the probes and find them, and and I got to sneak around, and then I got to like shoot them from far away to like kill them. Whatever that is, right? So this is kind of a like more stealth, long range mission, section where maybe I'm going off for like 10 minutes and I'm trying to like fight these things. Maybe this is a now. Now some of these, are stuff where I might make a note, for example, here, and go like, so, I might not know the answer to some of this kind of stuff, but it's important. Like, for instance, I may have spelled tauntaun right. But that's, that big two-legged kind of creature that that he's riding. Well, if that's a one-off and it's only for 10 minutes of the game, I probably don't want to design a section of my level around that, right? So your responsibility at some levels at this point, you're like, gotta be like, I don't know, like, okay, let me go ask somebody. So for now, whoops. I'm going to put that in orange, right? Because I'm like, I don't know about that, right? So things that are questionable, you can flag them, you can mark them, then go talk to somebody, and say like, hey, can I do that, right? But now maybe, maybe in another level I get to ride a horse, right? So you're like, okay, well, let me change the plot a little bit. Let me change my design a little bit. And I'm now going to ride a 4-legged horse instead of it being exactly like the Tauntaun. I will redesign it in such a way that it's easy for me to do, right? And easy for me to implement. And if I can't ride that, then do I have a motorcycle, equivalent to the speeder bike? Do I have a, whatever it is, or do I just do it on foot, right? And, and it could be a thing where there's a cutscene here, where instead of being able to ride the Tauntaun as a beast, or mount, then maybe, it's just a fast travel system, and the Tauntaun, maybe we have the time to implement it from an art perspective or something like that, and animate a few basic animations. So now when I start my level, I'm next to the Tauntaun, and I've already arrived, right? So the player doesn't have like freeform movement of the Tauntaun or something like that. So again, you want to keep asking yourself, like, is this a good idea? And so by doing this here and by reworking this, and then you're like, no, you know what? That's just, it's too hard. It's too complicated. Let me go back to here. So now here's another idea, right? So in a later section, we're going to have to ride the snowspeeder, and we're going to have to fight the AT-ATs with it. So why not have an introductory, more tutorial? We're going to have a tutorial that teaches that, right? And so that's something that we need to understand. Maybe we want to introduce this feature as just a pure movement feature, and then later on we can introduce it as then the combat side of it, right? So by having a snowspeeder here, we already have to implement a snowspeeder. We already have to implement flying it. This is just a non-combat. I'm going to fly in the snowspeeder out to a location. Maybe we can make that interesting because I got to maybe be secret about it. And I don't want to get seen, so I stay low to the ground. If I get too high, they detect me and they shoot me, or whatever, right? So how do I make this fun, right? How do I make just even movement and tutorials in a flying game, fun, right? Maybe there's a storm going on and, and things like that. Or, maybe I got to fly through an area where I know, well, in this particular case, the Empire hasn't arrived yet, and so, in this particular case, we're trying to kill these probes before they alert the Empire or something, right? So, again, I'm not trying to follow, Empire Strikes Back exactly, but just giving you an idea of the thought processes of how you're going about it, right? And then, what are these things going to include? So again, now I'm getting into defending the base, and I'm in, I'm out in the trenches, the AT-ATs and everything are coming at me, and all hell's starting to break loose, and I'm down in the trenches, and it might be initially that I've got these fixed gun turrets, and I'm trying to, fire at that, then eventually the snowtroopers get into the trenches with me, and now I'm fighting them hand to hand, and so, typical, kind of World War I, World War II style, trench warfare, right, and we're down in these trenches, and we're fighting, and going in and out of these different trench complexes, and stuff like that. So, that could be a lot of fun, right? Using the lightsaber, whatever mechanics are there available, that you want to teach them. But we're trying to define what's in this level. Why is it fun? What am I doing in the level? So this is kind of mostly combat. But it could also have and again, I'm just kind of brainstorming here, but like, what are these things that I'm doing, for this, 10 minutes, right? And that's something else you could put in here as well. So right now we've got there. So let's just say that this is, so we might want to have length in here. This is probably a pretty big level. Right now it's probably too big, but just giving you the idea. Right, so again, for each kind of section, again, you're guessing right now, but these are kind of helping you try to understand, how long is it going to be, how big is it going to be, what the location is going to be, what are my goals, for this particular section, key features, and again, the more that I can define, in text and in words, because again, I can iterate on this thing, I can change this thing way faster. Then if I jump in here and I start working on a map and trying to sort of lay all this stuff out, then I start to have problems, right? And that's where it starts to gets kind of crazy. So again, I would do a much deeper, bigger version of this. This is basically, a couple pages right now. What's it currently at here? So roughly 3-ish pages. Yeah, so roughly 3 pages. Okay, so again, in a traditional level, this could be 5 to 20 pages, of detail of, again, just kind of, like what else might I put in here just to kind of show you, like, again, key features, enemies. So now I could also start to say, like, for each one of these things, so for each little section here, you could start to kind of figure out, like, what is all going to be, in here. And you also could say, like, so, what are my, you may or may not have a little story plot for that 5 minutes. Those kinds of things. Is there a cutscene? New items. And again, I'm not going to do this for all of them. I'm not going to answer these questions right now, but I'm just trying to show you how you can think about these things and how you can, try to answer all of this stuff for all these, for each level, right? So again, outline your level first in words. And I can't tell you how many people don't do this, right? A lot of people just think that, like, oh, I can just jump into a level and start designing and start drawing it out. And it doesn't work that way. You got to know, in the same way that you just don't start building you don't jump in day one and start building your game in Unreal. You don't jump in minute one and start to understand, like, what your level is, without designing it first, right? And so again, in words, this is the fastest, cheapest, easiest place for you to do a lot of your work, right? And for you to understand, what is in your game, why is it going to be fun, again, what am I doing, my goals, my objectives, all that kind of stuff, right? And so by breaking it down into these like sections, you're also kind of getting some sense for like what is happening in this particular thing. Now, again, if you're doing an open world game or another kind of game, there might be, you might have things like so, so again, these are things that, I'm guessing for this particular level right now, but you would, again, keep iterating on these things. So like items needed, like to progress, right? So I might need to be able to, I can break this down even more. So, what are these things that you're needed, that you need, the Falcon key, whatever, you got to turn it on. No, just, putting silly things in here. But again, these are all stuff that you need to know in your level, right? These are all things you got to kind of figure out in your level, and you got to be like, okay, what do I need? How am I progressing? What new things am I going to have? But again, I'm not trying to tackle 1 hour of gameplay all at once. I'm breaking things down into smaller and smaller and smaller things that are easier for me to wrap my head around, right? So I'm trying to design these chunks, and trying to make those chunks interesting. Now, depending on your level and stuff like that too, let me show you guys. All right, I'm going to try something here. We'll see if my shoulder can do this. If not, I will use my mouse. So, for those of you that don't know, I dislocated my shoulder a few months ago, and so I still have kind of partial movement in my right shoulder. Below the screen here, I have a drawing tablet, so I'm going to attempt to kind of show you guys something here. But so if you think about like, wrong thing. All right. So if you think about like an entire map, and if this was my whole map, right? So if this is like the whole level, in most games, you might have a linear path now that's going to snake along through here, and it's going to come through there, and it's going to come back here, right? And so this is my start, and this is my end, right? Now, let's see. So the thing is, in a level is, even this is especially true in open world kind of games, and it's partially true in and even linear game stuff. Is game designers, for a variety of different reasons, both technical reasons and just time in general, both from us and other people, we generally don't have the ability to make like every little minute of this thing really, really fun, right? And so what ends up happening is we build out these little areas, right? So like this area here might be one, This might be one. And I'm just totally making this all up, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right now. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So these are the areas that my game, is taking place, right? Oops. So this is correlating to part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So, but the idea would be that there still can be areas, and so we'll say this is an area here. This is an area here. Maybe there's a little bit of an area here, a little bit of an area here, a little bit of an area here. And maybe there's a little section back in here or something, right? With a little bit of a path connecting these two. So why is this important to understand? Well, we don't have the time to detail out 100% of a level like really, 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 really intensely, right? And so what we're trying to kind of get at here is that there's these key memorable areas. Those key memorable areas might have a unique gameplay features, just like we've been defining, might have critical story, characters, locations, whatever that thing is, right? And so this could be the, so here is like the rebel base, right? And then maybe the, the AT-ATs are here, and then the probe droids are over here, and and then maybe this is the landing pads where all the ships are at. That's probably a bad thing. Those probably should be over there. So on and so forth, right? So these are all areas of the game, but they're not necessarily the entire map, right? And so you might need to have filler in here on some other stuff. And so in these kind of orangish areas, then, you don't necessarily have the time as a level designer. In some games it may not be true, but a lot of games it's not. So what you might want to be able to do is just to say like, X is being little like randomly spawned things. So as my path takes me through here, I might have some stuff, that's there, that's happening. Same thing up here along this path. I might have some enemies that are up here. I've got another little battle up here. I've got another little battle up here. And so the idea is that, that these things could be, kind of just randomly generated. Or, up here, maybe there's some resources and some stuff I need to find. Maybe here there's, some other stuff that I'm finding. So again, the idea is, and I know it's a mess, but like the green stuff could be randomly generated stuff that is things that are there, but I don't have to spend a lot of time like scripting those out and trying to make them perfect, right? And that's the main difference of why we're defining those kinds of areas where the green is at versus the areas where the main map is at. And so keep that in mind that as you're designing your levels, that again, you don't want to try to usually, unless you got a lot of time, a lot of budget, and those are things that you can't make in a 1 hour experience. You as a level designer just don't have necessarily the time to script every single second of that, right? And so you have to recognize that quite often, you're maybe there's times where the player might have to run, and he's gonna, and so let's see here. Just trying to think like, so for example, even in a single quest, I may come to here and then go like, okay, well I got to come up to here. I'm going to circle back around. I'm going to come back to here, and then I'm going to come back. So, then I'm going to come, this way. I'm going to follow this and but I'm going to come back here a little bit, and then I'm going to path through, and then I'm going to come down here, right? So my actual player movement path could be, going kind of all over the place. So while the main road or whatever that traverses me through this linear or semi-linear level could be different, my actual player paths may have me like, hey, I got to run over here and like get this thing, and I need to go, maybe I'm just searching around RPG style where I'm looking for stuff that, might help me. I might be like trying to like level up my character a little bit. I'm going to go fight some random guys that are kind of all over. I might be looking for some loot or whatever. Now, something else that, different too is, I didn't really talk about, is there might be some branching paths. So there could be an alternate path here. There could be a secret hidden path, across here, and, so on and so forth. And maybe this is a path that opens up, but it's, oops, bad job at drawing an arrow here. So in this particular case, the first time that I come down through here and I'm coming down and following this path, this could be blocked. And so now I'm going to continue along. I'm coming down this path. I'm doing my meandering. And then when I get to here, now there's a door, whether I come here or whatever, there's that hidden path reveals itself. And now, I can open the door. Maybe I walked by a door here, but there was no way to open it. But now I can unlock it here. Now I've got a way for me to come back here. Maybe I can come back up here, do whatever I'm going to do, and then come back here and continue along, that kind of thing, right? So again, starting to kind of think through some of this stuff. You can see even my complete chicken scratch, no artistic skill or ability here. But what I'm doing is I'm thinking through the paths. I'm thinking through the ideas. I'm kind of challenging myself to go like, okay, well, do I want a linear level, right? Do I want a branching level? Do I want a hub and spoke, do I want to have, for example, if this was, we'll draw another one here. Let's say this is, this was my level. Do I put my main base in the center, and then do I have like, so now I have, this going on, right? Maybe it's something along that lines, right? And so maybe I can even go over to here, right? So now I'm thinking through like, well, how do I want this to be structured, right? Like here is my level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and bonus or something, right? So again, like hub and spoke model, where these things may or may not all be open. I may have to go from 1 to 2, and then when I unlock that can take me, now I can take to 3 over here, or I can take 3 over here, right? Maybe I've got two paths to do it. And then, but maybe I got to come back to here before, then that takes me to 4. And then once I get to 4, it unlocks me back to 3, so on and so forth, right? And so depending on my ultimate desire for paths again, it could be, 1 to 2, and then back to here, but it also could be, we'll call it B here, path, bad, but AB paths here, and then that's my, my first path, and then so on and so forth, right? And then I can either come here or I can come there, so my B path might be here, my A path, right? So that's 4AB kind of thing, so on and so forth, right? So again, I'm thinking through, how do these things work? How are these things structured? How are these things good, right? And that's all stuff that's important for me to conceptualize in my chicken scratch. And again, you don't need to be a great artist to do these things, right? All right. So now we have our 5 locations. We've got some really rough sense of like what we want to do. So now, quite often, what I want to do is go in here and again try to flowchart out this. So what I will do is now change this to all right, let's just differentiate them that way. So now, another way to think about this is so what I'm doing here really quickly. Okay, pretend these say area on them, right? And just like we were kind of talking about, and so it could be that again, it's like a linear path with some branching. You know, could be one solution you're after. And again, this is kind of like going level 1, right? And so you're kind of trying to define these things, right? And so you know the so by just doing this is a more traditional, you know, flow chart. You know, then you know people can kind of get some sense within the game of really like what it is. But in the same hand, we might want to come into here and paste this. Now, you know, this is hyper simplified, guys. So this is a bit more of a traditional flow chart. And I'm very quickly, you know, defining this, right? All right, so imagine now that, you know, and then within each area, in fact, we could even go so far as, you know, another way to flowchart this is to say, all right, so again, I am hyper simplifying these things for sake of time. All right. Now, we might take and do something where, you know, oops. All right, so let's just say that's So you get the idea as far as like, this is a traditional flow chart, right? You know, I'm just kind of breaking it down, and however you do flow charts, but this is designed to approximate a game that you're playing, and in the linear fashion that you're play it. This is about really a time sequence. So I do X, then I do Y, then I do Z, then this event happens, this quest happens, and it could break down even farther. So like event 1 could even break down, to even say like, so on and so forth, right? So each one of these events can break down. All these things are flow charts, and then depending on the outcome, and you can get really crazy with this. This might, skip, straight over to here, so on and so forth. Versus this one would go, to there, depending on, if I did them both, then it might, skip over to some other sort of event, and some other kind of sequence or whatever. So however you're flow charting this out, the idea is that you have a rough time frame. It could be a very linear level, and this can be just a real like, here's my linear level. But you also can try to show some branching paths where I've got some extra branches going on and some other things going on. And again, you don't want to get it too crazy, or at least especially in the beginning. But you want to understand like how are the what are the what's going on in this, right? How is this going to be, cool, and how is this going to be unique, right? So the second stage in this is this rough flow chart of it, right? And again, this flow chart is designed to match this, right? And so you're really trying to define all that stuff now in a flow chart to try to understand the relationships between things and what goes to what, and you may come back and keep going back and forth between this page and the other page, the flow chart, and this, and you're gonna keep refining. Like, oh, that's a bad idea. Nope, okay, erase that. Nope, let's try that. Nope, let's try that. And then, what are the triggers? What are the events? So if I have this, thing like, this could be, like we mentioned another one, like battles. ST being stormtroopers. So introducing like ATST, right? So I don't know. I mean, I'm just, if you don't know the term setup, typically a fight, or what I'm here calling a battle, you might have some individual there's lots of things you could be defining in these levels, right? And all sorts of stuff, right? So the idea, though, would be that, how do I progress through this, and what's the linearity and time that I'm progressing through it? We got about less than 10 more minutes. If anybody's got any questions, please speak up. I'm going to try to do one last thing to show you guys how I would next approach the same flow chart. But again, if you've got any questions, please speak up here. So what I'm going to do real quick is make a copy of this now. So instead of a flow chart, now I'm going to call this a level spatial flow. So how do these differ, right? I'm basically taking the exact same thing, right? Now, think about this black box. So my drawing canvas right now, and I could come in here and redraw this a little bit or whatever it is, but oops. I'm not using the best application here, but I'm trying to kind of mimic this since it's sitting here, and kind of how that goes, right? So if I go back to that, so again, like, number one was there in the center, right? So I'm just going to follow this because I can. I'm going to move these off to the side. Move this off to the side. So number one was roughly in the middle, right? And so I'm moving. So now I'm keeping the same flow chart. Again, forgive the lines are not all connected, but assume that we're using a better program where the lines were connected. And again, these maybe connected that way, right? Now the next one would be, area 2. So that was over here, right? So let's just say that's right where it was there. Number 3 was up here. So we're gonna, oops. Oops, that's so area 3. Area 4 was over here. Area 5 was there. And area 6 was there. So you can kind of see what I did, right? Where now I took the same flow chart. It starts to get a little bit messy because the lines can kind of get all out of whack, right? But I can still refer back to my clean spreadsheet here, or my clean flow chart here. But now I'm starting to put some spatial awareness. And I'm like, that 6 didn't really work there. Like, I need to put that down here. And like, really that 5 should be over here. So I'm kind of starting to again get some awareness of what that is, right? Now the next thing I could start doing is going like, well, if this is my map, and let's just say it's 1 kilometer by 2 kilometers, right? Now, like, how big is level 1? Is this box gonna block me? All right, do this the hard way. All right, so there's area 1. Area 6 is kind of small. Area 2 is like that. So what am I... So what am I trying to do here, right? So now I'm building some size spatial awareness to that same flowchart, right? I'm using a really simple flowcharting application, and I'm starting to put things in perspective of how big they are in the world. And yes, this takes a little bit of like whatever, I can kind of figure out what I want to do here. Right? But now I can do things where I might take this. Let's call this E1. Right? So now I'm kind of starting to put, let's call this B2, and so on and so forth. Right, so you can see how the same flow chart now, I'm starting to kind of get some really, really, really rough things in place here. And so it's just, I'm beginning to kind of get the sense of what is in my level, right? And how big is everything. It's extremely rough, but again, you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be anything. This is just, you know, a real simple overview of how I take a text, bunch of words. I then flowchart it out to understand the relationship in time, and in flow and what goes to what and what's going to do to what. And again, this is a back and forth process. I don't just do one and then do the other. It's like, you know, I'm back and forth 1,000 times between these stages. And then, you know, I can take that same flow chart and I can kind of start to understand, like, all those things are now on that flow chart. And now I can start to put those same things, those same events here with some spatial awareness so that I can understand where my level is. And next week, we will get deeper into, like, how do I take this farther, right? So thanks, everybody. For those of you still awake, thanks for joining me. Hopefully this helped a little bit and you understood some logic about how you took, you know, and went from being a concept for an entire game in 25 levels and narrow it down a little bit to like one level and what I'm going to do there, how I break that level down in words, then how do I break it down into a flow chart, and then how do I break it down into a super, super, super rough, you know, block map, right? So anyways, I hope you found this helpful and interesting. Don't forget to, you know, to subscribe and like and all those kinds of fun things. You know, visit, again, our YouTube channel, you know, if you haven't seen all my previous episodes, and hopefully that will, you know, open your new careers, if you're interested in becoming a game designer. But definitely check out our website, and you know, if you're not familiar with CG Spectrum, and see all that we have to offer. So Big Lob, you're welcome. Alan, you're welcome. And thanks everybody again for watching this live or later on. And again, I hope you'll find these useful. So take care, everybody. Be safe and have a great week.